So, I've decided to do another tier ranking, and this time I'm ranking the United captains post-war. Through a mix of statistical information on each one and my own personal opinion, limited as it is, I will rate every captain we've had since the war. I'll also rank a further 2 notable and worthy pre-war counterparts who actually deserve their place in this video. As I've just mentioned before, I've decided to make it a bit more quantitative than in previous tier ranking videos, in part to save my own neck as you may not like some of the results, but mainly because it gives a more rounded view of the player as a captain, as there's some statistical information going into each ranking. There are 5 categories, all marked out of 10, which each captain will be judged on to give an overall score out of 50. They are 1. Time at the club, 2. Time as captain, 3. Trophies won, 4. Legendary status, and finally number 5. Notable captaincy qualities, mainly on but even off the pitch. You'll understand what I mean by that later on. Just so you understand how each one of these categories is judged, for time at the club, each year equals 1 point. Easy. Same goes for each year as captain. For trophies won, I've weighted that a bit different because it can't be a point per trophy, as for instance you can't equate a League Cup win and a European Cup on the same footing. So every charity or community shield is worth 1 mark, as is every second division title. Each UEFA Super Cup, FIFA World Club Cup or Intercontinental Cup is worth a little more at 1.5 marks. A League Cup is 2.5 marks. A Cup Winners' Cup or Europa League is 3 marks, the FA Cup is 4 marks, a top flight title, i.e. the old First Division or Premier League, is 6 marks, and due to the rarity and difficulty of winning it, a European Cup or Champions League, whatever you want to call it, is worth 7 marks. There's nothing particularly scientific with this is just how I personally weigh the trophies. Just for fairness, as there was no League Cup before 1960-61, and we didn't really take it seriously until, well, it was up and running several years later, and that we weren't even involved in European competitions until the mid-50s, I've done a cut-off point in 1967 to compensate as to not disadvantage earlier Red Devils captains. Instead, with no League Cup or Europe, as well as the massive prestige of winning the FA Cup back then, more than winning the title in fact, I've decided to give the FA Cup and the top flight title 10 marks each, and 2 points for winning the Charity Shield or second division title. The total number of marks is then divided by 3 to give a point score. Believe me, there is method in my madness. The legendary status is a point score I give to each player as a United player out of 10, as to how I judge them as a legend at the club. And finally, another subjective score out of 10 is given to me to judge their leadership, character, and the way they inspire on the pitch, in matches, or if they've gone above and beyond off the pitch too. This is easy for me judging captains since I've been supporting United like Robson, Bruce, even Rooney, but less so for captains in our past like Allenby Chilton or even Maurice Setters. So you'll have to forgive me if you don't agree, and in fact I encourage you to vent your spleen in the comments section below. Finally, the total points per captain will see each one put into a ranking tier based on their individual totals. The top tier for 46 plus points out of 50 is a born leader. The next tier down, 39 to 45 points, is inspirational. 31 to 38 points is solid, 23 to 30 points is mediocre or average, 12 to 22 points is poor, and finally the bottom tier is 1 to 11 points, and these unfortunate sods are categorised as forgettable. So after that's been explained, and don't worry if you don't get it straight away, it should become clear as we go through each player, let's start ranking our leaders on the pitch. First up is a true United legend, a player as well as a captain who, remarkably, is never in the conversation of United greats, perhaps because his tenure came before the Busby Babes truly kicked in, and anyone who came before, however great, was simply overshadowed. That said, Irishman Johnny Carey's stats speak for themselves and are reflected in his points allocation and the tier in the ranking. He was at United from 36 to 53, so a maximum 10 points for his longevity, but only served 8 of those as skipper. The war surely impacted on those, but I'm trying to keep speculation down to a minimum. Trophies wise, he won an FA Cup, a league title, and a Charity Shield as captain, meaning 22 marks, and that's 10 for Cup and League, plus another 2 for the Shield. Dividing that by 3 gives him 7 points for silverware. On legendary status, I'm giving him an 8.5. 18 years of red either side of the war, almost 350 games, played in 10 positions, read the game superbly to make up for his lack of pace. He just got better with age. His qualities as a captain also get 9. He was a great leader, didn't shirk adversity, led by example, would guide the young players, and his leadership helped to transform United from a pre-war yo-yo club to the most exciting side to watch in the league in that era. Altogether, that's a score of 42.5 points. And if I can find him, Johnny, there you are, that puts him into the inspirational tier. The successor to Johnny Carey, Stan Pearson, was a strange one. As United great or even legend, this technically gifted goalscorer was a great appointment if you simply wanted a quality player to lead by example. But whilst the team by the summer of '53 was full of potential and excellent players, there were very few veterans, and Busby was breaking the rules, so to speak, by simply introducing so many youngsters in lieu of established United stars. Perhaps making one captain was a bridge too far. Points-wise, like his predecessor, he played for United on both sides of the war, so a maximum there. But he was only captain till February, not even a season, making it an even stranger choice by Busby. Anyway, that's a generous 1 point for his years as captain, but nothing for silverware. As United legend, I'm giving him a solid 8 points. He was one of the famous 5 attacking lineups, scored in the 48 Cup final, and was a superb player for us, with a goal-to-game ratio of 0.43. Captaincy qualities, well, that's pretty difficult to assess as he plays so few games in that role, and biographies on him tend to overlook that honour. He was a measured individual, liked by all, and not aggressive in his play like Carey or most great captains you can think of, so I'm guesstimating a 3 for that, giving him a disappointing 22 points and into the poor tier ranking. I just want to make it clear, for those of you crying foul, giving this grade to such an accomplished United player in this ranking is based on plays as a United skipper and the metrics involved. You shouldn't confuse that with their greatness as a United player. It's a different thing. This will pop up again and again, by the way, so you have been warned. Perhaps the man who should have taken over from Johnny Carey was Stan Pearson's successor, Allenby Chilton. I'll admit before doing my research, I knew little about him apart from the fact that he was a giant, no-nonsense centre-back. He was also a war veteran, having been injured in Caen, France, and also missed some of his best years due to the conflict. On the playing side, he was uncompromising and apparently self-serving, which happened to be very good for the team as well. It was reportedly Chilton who gave the half-time team talk in the 48 Cup final against Blackpool, with the boys 2-1 down, because as former teammate John Doherty stated, he wanted his win bonus. He wasn't only a great stopper, but he wasn't afraid of giving it to teammates with both barrels, so they would up their game. Points-wise, he gets the maximum for his service to the club, following his 2 post-war predecessors as being a red devil on either side of the conflict. He's let down a bit. They only served 2 years as captain, being moved on in 1955 at 36 years old. Also, no trophies in this transitional time between the old guard and the babes. That hasn't helped him either. As a legend, he's a solid 7, and as a captain, for the reasons mentioned above, regardless of his motivation, he's a 9, which means I have to put him with 28 points into the mediocre tier, I'm afraid. Roger took over in 1953 and was almost ever present until his untimely death at Munich. Several years older than most of the babes, Roger was a right-sided player who, like Dennis Irwin, who came 40 years later, did his best work on the left flank, and like the Irishman and unlike the style of the day, liked to support the attack from that position. He was a bit more versatile and was used to great effect by Busby on the wing, thanks to his pace. He was tipped to replace England captain Billy Wright to skipper the national team, with the Wolves legend retiring the following season to Munich. On to the point scoring, and Roger gets 7 points for his time at United. I don't count the years in the youth side before turning pro, unfortunately. He is cruelly marked down for only being captain for 5 years, albeit cut short. Again, I can't speculate as to the player's career had things been different. Under his leadership, United won 2 titles and 2 charity shields, adding up to 24 marks and so 8 points. Legendary status is 8 for me. I can't give all our lost souls at Munich automatic 10s. Had Roger survived and played on, he could well have been an iconic captain like Robson or Keane. Finally, as a captain, he's getting a 9. His leadership skills were purported to be inspirational, and as mentioned a little earlier, he was in the conversation to succeed Billy Wright as England captain. That confirms the assessment for me. So that's 35 points, and perhaps unfairly to Roger Byrne, he is a solid captain for United. I think he probably deserved better. There has to be a lot of respect for Bill Foulkes for answering Jimmy Murphy's request to take the armband post-Munich, whilst probably suffering from PTSD despite surviving the crash essentially physically unscathed. And just for that, you'll get a few more captaincy points in the final assessment. Bill himself was a decent right-back who was converted into an indomitable centre-back and served the club in that position for over 17 years. A determined, single-minded and strong defender, he was also quick and good in the air. He may not have had the talent of other Busby babes, but he was picked by Sir Matt Busby 688 times, so he couldn't have been too bad. This period of captaincy, from 19th of February in the club's first match back from the tragedy, till the end of the following season, the side did remarkably well, all considered. They made it to Wembley in the Cup final, and the following season, the team unbelievably came runners-up in the league beyond everyone's expectations. Onto the ranking then. Bill gets maximum points for his time served at United and 2 points for his period as skipper. Nothing again for trophies, but as a legend he's clearly a 10 for me. As a captain I can't really say, it's unfair to give him a high mark, but this willingness to pull on the armband, as mentioned just now, is a 7 for me. Overall that's a 28 and a mediocre ranking, but that doesn't really fit for what he did for Jimmy and United post-Munich. With his favour completed, the baton was passed to legendary striker Denis Viollet, an elite goal scorer who forged arguably the best striking partnership United ever produced with Tommy Taylor, recording 300 plus goals between them. This is another man who managed to come back after Munich, albeit with more serious injuries and probably some psychological demons with survivor's guilt. He'd make it back in time to play in the latter games of the season, including that cup final, but now he'd be wearing the armband. It seemed to be a strange choice for a quiet man on the field. Anyway, points wise, it's 9 for time served, just 1 for the solitary year wearing the armband, 0 for trophies, and a worthy 9 as a legend. I'll take this opportunity to plug my video on him, the link is in the description. Finally, I'm guesstimating a 5 as skipper, as once again there is little info on him on that respect. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, and with a score of 24, he joins his former colleague in the mediocre section. Next up was a hard man and a stopper, Maurice Setters. He was certainly a decent buy, but from some of what I've read, someone who didn't always listen to what he was instructed to do on the pitch. His job was to stop the opposition and win the ball. So far so good, but then lay it off to the creative players and distribute it to the likes of Crerand or Law. This he didn't do so well, as he thought he could play a bit, but that wasn't his remit. Therefore, in the light of that, it's so strange that Busby would choose him. Also, when he became captain, he became a little bit too big for his boots by some accounts, and Busby could be just as ruthless as Fergie with a player's ego. After just 2 seasons with the armband, he passed it on. He played on at Old Trafford for 2 more campaigns as an ex-captain. Points-wise, Setters was only at United for 5 years, 2 as mentioned performing as skipper, no trophies, legendary status only a 5 for me, and 6 for his duties as captain. That gives a paltry 18, and unfortunately I have to put him in the poor tier if I can find him, yeah. Maybe unfair. Finally, after several years, United got solid captain material when Busby bought the veteran international fullback from West Ham, Noel Cantwell. He was a solid, composed and cultured defender, but probably had his best days already in East London. But as a captain, he was a great father figure to the younger lads, a guiding hand, and very personable with the squad, a man to follow. In this ranking, he does get lucky though. Whilst others on it, as you've just seen, don't have their rating calculated in their favour, Noel was at the club 7 years, captain for 5 of those up to the time he left. Now this is where things kick in for Noel. He was the cup-winning captain of 63 and had 2 league titles in 65-67, and then another 2 charity shields in the same years, but barely played in either campaign. Indeed, his successor Denis Law lifted the title on both occasions. It's like a kind of Robson-Bruce dynamic we'll see later on in the video in the early part of the Premier League era. Based on my scoring, he had 34 marks for trophies, converting into a maximum of 10 points. I think I'm going to make a common sense amendment here. Noel gets the cups 10 marks and then half the other 24 marks, the King getting the other 12 marks. So in all that's 22, so a 7 out of 10 for silverware. As a legend lifting the first trophy since Munich, an FA Cup win does give him some credit, but he's still not in the same legendary bracket as other players of that era like Nobby Stiles, who wasn't even a captain. So a 7 for that and 7 for his captaincy. That gives him a grand total of 33 points and allows me to deservedly slot him into the solid tier. As previously mentioned, the King, Denis Law, took the captain's armband as Cantwell left in the title-winning year of 67. What can you say about this man? Another one who I've dedicated a Gadabout United Legends video to. Again, the link is in the description below. He's an elite striker, still the only king to many older Reds, and by God he earned that title. But this is about the player as a skipper, a leader of men, and the club's representative on the field, not a goal-scoring machine whose strengths are too numerous to mention. Denis was tough, determined, and would drag himself and his side through adversity. But when I've read biographies of the man, articles, his captaincy of the club, which officially is a year, but who lifted the 65 and 67 titles on behalf of the club, isn't specifically mentioned. So point scoring, 10 for longevity and legendary status, of course, and given a bump for his time as captain for the reasons already given, but it's still just 3 points. His trophies, well, the European Cup, he was injured for that, but that's still worth 7 marks. I'm now converting the marks post-67 into my modern weighting achievements, by the way, but he'll still get the 12 marks for his slice of lifting 2 league titles and 2 charity shields in the preceding years in lieu of Cantwell, but that still converts to 6 points anyway. And captaincy ability, I can't bring myself to give him more than an 8. The Law man de facto led United through one of their most successful spells up to that point, which cannot be ignored. So altogether that's a 37, which is a solid score for United captain, who, if he'd held the position longer, would have been inspirational. Moving on to Denis's absence from the 68 European Cup final through injury, it was in fact Bobby Charlton who lifted the trophy in his stead, and in our finest hour up to that point. Now, do I really need to give you the brief on Sir Bobby? If you want to know more, check him out on another link in the description below for the bio video I did on him. Once more, he's a player not readily known for his captaincy, and it's again not covered very much by biographies. What I do know is that he's a winner, was vocal when he had to be, led by example and reputation. As a captain, was he a Johnny Carey? Probably to a lesser extent, and so point-wise I'll give him 7.5 for his captaincy qualities, but 10 for his legendary status and obviously longevity. He was captain for 5 years, but technically didn't win anything under his tenure, although I might give him a point for lifting the European Cup. That gives Mr. Manchester United a score of 33.5, and as a captain he goes into the solid section with Roger, Noel and Denis. So now from one extreme to another, a player that probably shouldn't have worn a United shirt, never mind led the side out. I'm not sure any member of the Doc's red and white army knew exactly what the boss was thinking. In 1973, George Graham became captain after Bobby Charlton retired. To sum up, George Graham's time at Old Trafford as a player, never mind as a captain, is expressed perfectly in his wiki entry. Graham moved for £120,000 to Manchester United in December 1972. He spent 2 years at United and was relegated to Division 2. I'm not going to bother breaking down the score for you, but he gets 6 out of 10, and that's without penalising him for the relegation. Completely forgettable, and I'm sure that the fact that he even played for us is a surprise to some of you. Now, talk about contrasting characters. The next United skipper was Willie Morgan, a fan favourite, an exciting winger, a very skillful player, and depending on your point of view, a Red Devils great or even a legend. Again, a very strange choice for captain to have a winger, especially when the aim is to lead us out of the second tier of English football at the first attempt. I was looking for a reference to Morgan and especially his captaincy in a book written by his manager, Tommy Docherty, which charted amongst other things the Doc's own reign. I found little apart from the manager who made him skipper saying that he hadn't been great for the last 3 of his 7 seasons at the club, so why make him captain? That seems weird. Now his tier ranking, well, he gets 7 points for longevity and 7.5 for his legendary status. However, his solitary year as captain is just 1 point, but we did get promoted with him up until he left in late April, just before we got presented with a second division trophy. As a captain and for those kinds of leadership qualities, I can only give him a 4 for a total rounded up to 21 points, and I'm sorry, but that's the mediocre category. If I can grab him, there he goes. So, from a couple of sets of extremes to another, to Martin Buchan, a player born to be a captain, a leader, and like his predecessors Johnny Carey and Roger Byrne, synonymous with the privilege. We've had Denis Viollet, Denis Law and Bobby Charlton, 3 United legends, who have and will stand the test of time, but really aren't known as being captains of this great club. But with Martin Buchan, for fans like me who were babies, fetuses or a twinkle when he was playing, we only know him from old footage as the 1977 Cup final skipper, and didn't know how cultured or cool he was on the ball. He also had tremendous pace, read the game superbly, and was a reliable big game player and a leader. In fact, researching his Gadabout United Legends video made me appreciate him a lot more. His only real issue was that he was born in generally a mediocre era for the club. Had he played in better United sides, he would have been as well known as Robson, Byrne, Carey or Keane. As a skipper, he was disciplined, organised, forthright and structured. Some players may not have liked him, but they respected him and followed him out of the second division and to glory at Wembley. Buchan gets full marks for longevity, a 7 for his time as captain, 8 for his legendary status and 10 for his facets leading the side. What hurts him in this ranking is his lack of silverware, second division title, an FA Cup, a charity shield, which only gave him 2 points for a total of 37 and into the solid tier. After Martin Buchan went into the sunset in 1982, the technically gifted midfield playmaker Ray Wilkins got the job. Now I have a lot of time for Ray, and whilst a poor ranking is imminent, he was only in the job a year and spent 5 seasons at Old Trafford and won no silverware as a skipper, I want to give him his due. He was bought from Chelsea with future England captain written all over him, and he did lead his country out on several occasions, but his best work was in West London. This was probably due to the fact that Old Trafford manager Dave Sexton played him far too deep for him to be able to use his skills effectively. Playing that far back also probably accounts for his mere 10 goals in 194 appearances. As a captain, he was a solid leader, led by example and was very personable. I gave Ray a 6 for legendary status, which in part is due to his cracker in the 83 Cup final, and 7 for his facets as a captain, giving him an unflattering score of his abilities of 19 as he slips undeservedly, perhaps, into the Porter with Maurice Setters and Stan Pearson. Later that year, Ray was relieved of the captaincy and still played at Old Trafford for 2 more years, and the person who took over was Ron Atkinson's favourite son, Bryan Robson. Robbo was my first hero and first captain. When I started supporting United in around 1984, he was a box-to-box midfielder. He could do everything. He could tackle, intimidate, head, be physical, pass, score goals and run all day. He had a superb engine and threw himself all around as if he was indestructible, which saw him suffer more than his fair share of injuries and lengthy periods out of the game. This hurt us when season run-ins saw us miss out on trophies. As a captain, in my opinion, he's the greatest United skipper of all time and had all the attributes you could want. He led by example, was a motivator of men, a big game player, was respected by the opposition and when necessary, an enforcer. As I mentioned, his only weakness were his layoffs, which surely affected Big Ron's chances of winning even more silverware, and perhaps even Fergie's in the 80s. Both subjectively and by my metrics, he maxes out on each one, earning 50 points out of 50, perfect score, a top position, top tier, born leader. On to the next one. Just a note on something I missed regarding Robbo. The great man kick-started a series of really good, even excellent United captains, in by far the best period for the club, as you all probably know. Steve Bruce, who was technically captain for just 2 years, was essentially leading the side from like 91-92 due to the huge swathes of games Robson had missed. He wasn't quick and he wasn't the greatest player, but he could read the game really well, was stupidly brave, would play through injuries that most men would demand a sick note for, was a match with his head and regularly put the ball in the back of the net, with 51 goals from 414 games at centre-back. As a captain, he was respected by his teammates, wasn't afraid to tell anyone they needed to buck up their ideas, and was a great replacement for his fellow Geordie. His points allocation is 9 for time served and captaincy traits, and I have added some more points for being a de facto captain in Robson's absence for his last 2 seasons. I've also added some marks for his trophy wins, taking him to 5 points and 8.5 for legendary status. He deserves it. That totals 35.5 points, and this man goes into the solid section next to the great Martin Buchan. After Brucey came Eric. Cantona had lifted the FA Cup in the skipper's absence this season before, after his strike had led us to our second double in 3 years. It's not an underestimation that Eric's arrival in November 92 changed a side bereft of confidence, still hurting from the league title loss the year before, into a different proposition completely. It wasn't just due to his mastery with the ball, but his influence on the players around him. The dedication to his craft by staying behind after training to work on his skills, which impacted on the young class of 92 as well as more senior pros, was probably one of the reasons why Fergie made this volatile Frenchman his 3rd club captain. Eric wasn't a shouter. What he produced on the pitch and his motivation and inspiration that lifted his teammates, whether he wore the armband or not. Outside of certain Busby babes we lost, there aren't many players I can think of who would earn legendary status despite being at the club for just 5 years. I'm shy to give any players full points for this category who only spent this amount of time at Old Trafford. But just thinking for a second of his impact on the fans as well as the team, and the fact that he's only one of 2 players in our history that we have dubbed simply the King, clearly shows that he can't get any score but a 10 as a legend. As a captain, leading by example, you can only go so far, so that's a 7 for me. And he's hurt in this scoring by being at the club only a short time, holding the role for a season before retiring, and only collecting the Premier League and Charity Shield under his tenure. And that gives him just 25 points and a mediocre rating. Over there. If you conducted a poll at any time in the last 15 years asking who is the greatest ever United captain, with all of them to choose from, 2 names would garner something like 85% plus of the vote by themselves. One is Bryan Robson, the other, Roy Keane. I remember when the surly Irishman joined United, I was pretty pleased as he'd been a solid Forest player for years, and Robbo was rarely playing, but I couldn't fathom the impact he'd not only have as a player but as a captain at the club. At 5'10", he's not as short as you'd think, but however tall he is, he could intimidate the hell out of any opposition, especially once he became captain and sported a shaven head. As a player, he was a pure soldier combatant, a fierce tackler, terrific winner of the ball, who was happy to lay it off to more creative elements, but could score goals himself before eventually playing deeper towards the latter half of his Old Trafford career, but never stopped working. As a captain, he defied convention, never shirked from a challenge, slapped the face of adversity, and if he challenged you, criticised you or told you to do something, you responded to what he expected. Keane's personality was literally like having Fergie on the pitch, which makes it very surprising yet inevitable in some ways that he was going to get on the gaffer's wrong side. Like Busby before him, Fergie didn't like challenges to his hegemony. I'm not sure what Keane did specifically, but the Scotsman drummed him out of the club on trumped up charges. That doesn't change his legacy as skipper, and if he'd held that position for just a couple more years, he'd have matched Robbo's flawless total. But 48 points isn't too bad, and he still gets on Captain Marvel's tier. He is a born leader. There you go. Taking over from Keane was a Manc through and through and a massive United supporter, Gary Neville. Neville had come through the class of '92 and was one of the ones to get established more quickly. Although not the most talented of the crop of the United youth graduates, he made up for that with his passion and professionalism, which is probably why Fergie chose him for the captain's armband. He was nowhere near aggressive as Keane, but he was no shrinking violet either, and he loved to rub people's faces in it, especially the Scousers. That endeared him to the Old Trafford faithful. Under his leadership, he led United to 2 league titles, a League Cup, a Champions League and other trinkets. He admitted that he wasn't the most vocal of captains or the greatest leader, but there were so many leaders on the pitch that he didn't have to be, which is fair comment. And once again, that goes to his credit. With so many options to choose from, Fergie chose him. This one club man gets full points for longevity, just 5 for time spent as captain, and 8 for the silverware won underneath him. I've judged his legendary status as an 8. His 600 plus games speak for themselves, but I can't bring myself to put him any higher. His captaincy qualities are 7.5 for me, giving him a total of 39 and edges him just about into the inspirational bracket. After Neville came another beast of a United player, Nemanja Vidic. The Serb came to United at the age of 24 in 2006 and formed a formidable partnership with the cultured Rio Ferdinand, who'd been at the club for several years already. As intimidating as Jaap Stam or Roy Keane, Nemanja Vidic was cut from granite. A terrific stopper, full of pride and confidence, good in the air and the tackle, and selflessly brave. He was and still is loved and quoted by United fans for his commitment to the cause, and was able to pop up with an important goal on occasion from getting on the end of set pieces. As a captain, his leadership by example, enthusiasm and stature was Keane-esque. The Serb gets 8 points for time spent and for legendary status. His qualities as a captain get him an 8.5 for me, but he loses points on the cold stats that he wore the armband for only 4 years, and whilst United won several trophies in the death throes of Fergie's golden age, that only gives him 6 points and a total of 34.5, and perhaps an unfair, solid position for the Serb. Now, perhaps the last great or even very solid United captain, we'll see how this goes, is Wayne Rooney, who came from Everton in 2004 and was an unbelievable prospect just as a teenager when we signed him. The youngster from the start played a standard that was way beyond his years. You could see that he loved the game and moreover scoring goals. There was a cocky arrogance to him which had its positive and negative sides, and whilst it would get him into trouble on and off the field, it would also make him an indomitable figure in the side. You can check out more about Roo with my video on this legend in the link below. Wayne Rooney was the first captain not to be under Fergie since Ray Wilkins back in 1982, and was given the armband by Louis van Gaal in 2014. Roy Hodgson made him England captain in the same year. There must have been something there for both of these veteran managers to choose this volatile Scouser. Rooney was all heart, and whilst he wore our famous red jersey, he would have died for the shirt despite being brought up as an Evertonian. In a mediocre side, the former prodigy was able to lift his team through his own performances, now playing in a far deeper role than when he signed for us, and won trophies when we were struggling in the league. Wazza led us to both domestic cups, the Community Shield and the Europa League, United's first European trophy in almost a decade. He would run all day, was a great creative hub, and someone who was respected by the senior pros and by younger players alike. Rooney gets 9 for being a legend. I think a lot of Reds look back unfavourably with how he conducted himself, wanting away and during the renegotiation of contracts. Full points for longevity, and whilst there are different types of captains, I'm giving his inspirational type of leadership 8.5. As with other top captains in this list, he suffers from circumstance, with United earning him just 4 points for trophies won and 3 for the number of years as captain. He matches Vidic again for his total of 34.5 and joins him in the solid position. Wayne Rooney was the last trophy-winning captain to date. Michael Carrick was a cultured midfield playmaker who came to Old Trafford in 2006 and was integral to United's success thereafter. A consistent performer, reliant on his intelligence and technical abilities rather than being a ball winner or box-to-box player. He formed a partnership in the middle of the park with Paul Scholes, and that would win him and the club glory home and abroad. He played a massive 464 games in his little over 11 seasons at United, scoring 24 times. The Geordie took over from Rooney for a season in 2017, before retiring at the end of that campaign. With the lack of other leaders now in the squad, it was of little surprise that the vice-captain took over the role, but he wasn't really a leader in any way that his illustrious predecessors had been, going back to Martin Buchan. With all due respect, Carrick began a period of mediocre captains that carries on to this day. Yet another Geordie, he gets 10 points for longevity, but only 7 for legendary status, which you may or may not think is unfair, and 5 for captaincy traits. He scores poorly with 1 and 0 points respectively for time as skipper and trophies won. That's 23 points, and he's lucky to scrape into the mediocre tier. Next to Cantona. Next up is a very strange choice of captain, Antonio Valencia. But as just mentioned, looking down the playing rota, there are slim pickings. Who else? De Gea? Surely not Pogba, if he only were a professional instead of a narcissist. Valencia was a fine player for United in his pomp on the wing, causing a lot of trouble with his pace, bulk and ability to score and create goals. He spent 10 years with United, winning 9 trophies and scoring 25 goals in 335 games. A low return for a winger, but then take into account that, along with many of the others, he dropped back, this time to full-back later in his career. Anyway, whilst Antonio gets 10 points for his long service, he was the only skipper for a season and the boys didn't win any trophies under him. Further on, legendary status, I'm giving him a 5. And on captaincy qualities, I go back to the point that he was only probably made captain as there was no one else. So I'll give him a 1 out of 10 for a total of 17, and he's going to Paul and he's lucky to get that. Ashley Young came into United in 2011 and stayed for 9 years. Another captain by default, Young was an inconsistent performer. His wing play and goals could rip a side apart like Arsenal 8-2 in the 11-12 season, but he also went missing or had too many bad games. At his best, he was a nippy, tricky winger, and he put a lot of effort into that. But then he converted, like his predecessor, to full-back role later in his career. In any of the Fergie sides from 1986 to 2013, he wouldn't have had a sniff of the captaincy, even for a one-off game. But now, in unexceptional times, he was the leader on the pitch. Ashley Young has a total point score of 17, taking into account his longevity at the club, which saves him from complete humiliation. He was only 4 months as captain as well. Lucky to get 1 point for that. I thought they had more about him as a captain than Valencia, so he gets a 3 and a 4 for legendary status because I'm kind. He joins the previous holder in the poor tier, and he's lucky not to be lower. And now we're up to the present day with Harry Maguire, and what a mess we're in. I'm not going to go after him, some of the abuse he gets online is shocking, but how Ollie was treated, a bona fide United legend who just wasn't up to the task of being a manager, I shouldn't be surprised that Maguire is the focus of this volume of hatred and mockery. He was a terrible captain last year, that's fair, and if Ten Hag continues with him as captain, I think the boss will already lose a little faith from swathes of United fans. At the end of the day, Maguire needs to regain his form and concentrate on his own game, and remind us why we paid £85 million for him in the first place. Far better players than him, Denis Law and Butch Wilkins, have held and been relieved of the captaincy and played on for years, winning silverware. Scoring Maguire is unfair too. He's been at the club for a short time, so he doesn't really get the undeserved bump Valencia and Young enjoyed. And also, what am I going to give him for legendary status or his captaincy abilities? At the moment, he's a 7 out of 50 for me. Forgettable. That could change over time, but that means him holding on to the armband. So that was the ranking of all the post-war United captains. I hope that you found it interesting. They didn't veer away too much from your own estimations, and mostly that it all made sense from a points perspective. Now, as I mentioned what seems ages ago, there are a couple of pre-war United skippers that deserve a mention, adding to the 25 post-war captains. The first pre-war United club captain is on here just because of how vital he was to United's existence at all, more than any other player in off 144 or more years as Newton Heath and Manchester United. Harry Stafford joined Newton Heath in 1896, becoming captain a year later. We don't know a great deal about him, but he was a very athletic defender. By 1901, Newton Heath was struggling. A bazaar was set up to help raise funds at the event. Harry Stafford's St Bernard dog Major went missing and came into the possession of a wealthy local brewer and businessman, John Henry Davies. Davies wanted the dog as a present for his daughter's birthday, offering Stafford a handsome amount for the canine, but was refused. Despite fundraisers and donations given by players and supporters, the club was still £2,600 in debt. Stafford, using Major as bait, set up a meeting with Davies and Newton Heath representatives and got him to invest in the club, on one condition. Davies said that the name needed to be changed. The club became Manchester United. Major became a 12-year-old girl's birthday present, and you were able to support the greatest club in the world because of it. I don't know much about Stafford, but points-wise he gets 7 and 6 points respectively for longevity and time spent as a captain, 7 points for legendary status, and 9.5 for captaincy skills. It may have been off the pitch, as I mentioned right at the beginning of the video, but in his role as captain, if he hadn't fought for the club, even to the point he gave his own dog away to secure investment, well, there are no league titles, no FA Cups and European trophies for those who came after him to win. Also, he became the first United player to ever get sent off against Liverpool, which justifies my choices. His total of 29.5 puts him in the mediocre tier though. And finally, we move 2 years later, after Harry Stafford left the club, and 1905 with the captaincy of United legend Charlie Roberts. Roberts had come from Grimsby the year before as a quick and solid centre-back and someone to lead the team from the front. He captained United to a mini golden age, and it would be the best period in the club's history for its first 60 or 70 years. 2 league titles were won, 2 charity shields, including the first ever competed, and the side's maiden FA Cup success. Eventually, with inspirational boss Ernest Magnell leaving Old Trafford, things started to fall apart, and Charlie moved to Oldham. Points-wise, he cleans up. With his 300 games, most as captain, and all of his trophies, he's a solid 8 as time spent as captain, legendary status and captaincy qualities. He also gets full points for trophies, calculating with the old method, and 9 points for his longevity, giving him 43 points, an entry into the inspirational tier. So that was it. Thank you for listening to it all if you just didn't skip ahead to the end, and I'm sure you'll appreciate those worthy pre-war additions to the 25 post-war skippers. Let me know what you thought and whether you agree or not with my breakdown. Who was your favourite captain and which one means the most to you? Comment below and like, share and subscribe. Thank you as always for your support.